Greetings, it's Reverend Ahmondra, and I am coming to you from the place where the queens always speak our truth. Today, I'm going to be talking about living a purposeful life. I have many talks with individuals, and one of the themes that always comes out is they say, I need to find my purpose in life. And I say to them, you don't have to look for your purpose. Your purpose is already within you. Our purpose is built on our values. I want to lay out to you how I look at purposeful living. Purposeful living has the foundation of our values. And our values come from three specific places in our lives. Our values come from our ancestors, and I'm talking about our immediate ancestors, like our grandparents, our great grandparents, or even our mothers and our fathers if they've already passed on. Our values also come from those long, long ago ancestors, the original ancestors, our ancestors from Africa. And many of us have no idea what those values are because we weren't taught the values of our African ancestors. Our values also come from our own personal experiences. So we take the values that we get from our ancestors as little children, as we're growing up, and then our own personal experiences come into play. And our values are expanded or they're decreased depending on what experiences we have. And the third place that our values come from are from our environment, from our community, particularly those of us who grow up in a close knit African American community, or we grow up in communities that don't look like us. Our values begin to be shaped by that. And our purpose in life is based on those values. Because when you talk about living on purpose, you're basically talking about living a life from a place that's important to you. Purposeful living means that you are clear and specific on how you choose to live your life based on your values. One of the things that we are not taught is that our lives are rooted in our values. We seem to think that our lives are controlled by our circumstance, where in reality, our lives are controlled by our values, and our values are put on top of our current circumstance, and that gives us our current behavior. I want to share with you how my values have influenced my life, and that will allow you to begin to look into your own life and see how your values were given to you, how they shifted, how they changed, and what are the values you are living with today. When I begin to identify the values that I received from my immediate ancestors, I go back to my grandmother, who was from West Indies. When I used to visit my grandmother in Bermuda as a little girl, she would give me so much money and tell me to take it down the street to the neighbor's house. There were families who had come together and formed a financial club, and each week they put money into that pot, and at the end of the month, one person would get all of that money. So unknown to me as a young child, I was learning the value of community. I remember going with my uncles and my grandmother to what they call building parties, where all the men would get together and they would help one of them build the house. The plumbers would come, the carpenters would come, and then the women would be there to fix the food and to make sure that everyone had what they need as far as nourishment was concerned. So one of the values that I gathered was rooted in community, and we take care of those inside of our community. That was a value, and a value of honesty, that if you were given something, if someone shared something with you, you held it because you were honest. You stood in integrity with who you were. Your word was your bond. That is a value that I have deep within me today. Now, as I grew and I started having my own experiences out in the world, one of the values I learned as an adolescent was to always make sure I did everything I needed to do to take care of myself. So I learned how to take care of me, but how to also make sure that my friends were included. Again, it was that value of taking care of the community, but also taking care of myself. I grew up in public housing. We would come together and support each other if somebody was lacking a resource. if someone suffered a loss or death of a family member. But I also learned inside of community that we had to take care of ourselves because we lived inside of a very racist society. And that racist society was always impacting us in negative ways. I saw one of my best friends shot in the back by a policeman. I lived through the civil rights movement where I stood up for the values of my community, the values of being treated with respect. And I participated in sit ins, I participated in marches, I participated in political events to show this larger society that we deserve to be respected. And so that began to shape my value. I was blessed in that I had the opportunity to live in Africa for a year. And in Africa, I saw values also again rooted in that deep connection to community. There was this going back and forth all the time, a sharing of resources. So our values are the foundation of who we are. We don't always look and identify our values as being the foundation for our purpose in life, but they are. I also want you to understand that many of us come up in situations and the values that are passed on to us aren't always positive. They could also be negative values. And as a result, our purpose is not grounded in this great positive area. It could be rooted in pain. It could be rooted in negativity because that is what we experience. Our purpose in life is actually our long term goal. But let's say we came up in an environment where we had to watch our back and we had to protect what was ours. Then our value says to us that I take care of myself and that I get others before they get me. That's a value. And our long term goal is to do exactly that. It's not that it's bad, it's that that is our foundation. And so when you look at your foundation, you begin to understand why you're living your life the way you're living it, what the purpose of your life is right now. And then when you want to begin to change that purpose, you begin to look at the values and you shift and change your values. You can have two individuals that grow up in the same community, sometimes in the same household, and have total and completely different purposes in life because of their personal experiences and because how they develop. It's important to know and understand that you are a unique individual and that when you can identify what value you want to have in your life, your purpose will come out of that value. Me growing up and understanding the importance of community, to nurture community, to take care of community, to protect community, while at the same time protecting myself, but not to the detriment of someone else, led me into a life of being a social worker. My purpose in life, my goal in life, my long term goal in life is to be a place of support for others. That's my purpose. Today in my ministry, when I work with individuals, one of the biggest challenges that we have is to go in and identify those original values. Because a lot of times, our original values, they are covered over by the experiences that we have in life, particularly when we experience a lot of pain and a lot of anguish. We forget that we have some values that are up under all of that. We begin to get caught up in behaviors that don't necessarily serve us. And we begin to live lives that we don't necessarily like. As Black women, sometimes we have so much pain that we are pushed down and that we're living with that we don't see our initial value. So, what I say to you today is take the time to go back and look at the values that were passed to you from your ancestors, your grandmother. Look at those values. How did you treat your friends? What was important to you? Those were your values that you were expressing. And then inside of your community, what were the values that were held up in your community? You look at those original values and then you go in and you look at your experience and you see what experiences covered over some of your values. And when you begin to look at the experiences and separate them out, you begin to see your value. And when you identify your value and you heal the pain, you begin to live purposeful lives. Because now you could say, I value taking care of others, being of service. This is what I want to do. Not from a place of obligation, from a place of love. Our values are what gives us our purpose. And when we're living a purposeful life, we're living an empowered life. I also want you to look at what values are you helping those around you develop? You want to be clear on the values that you're passing on to the people around you, because one day you will be considered their ancestors and they will begin to understand how to create purposeful lives based on the value that you gave them. Purposeful living ties into also being your authentic self. If you haven't watched the video, Living an Authentic Life, I invite you to look at that video. If you have looked at it, then you see how being authentic and purposeful living go together. Thank you for joining me today. If you haven't picked up a copy of my new book, The Uncrowned Queen Reclaims Her Throne When a Black Woman Breaks the Silence, please pick up one. Right now, we are watching a queen ascend her throne and reclaim her crown. Her name is Kamala Harris. If you haven't voted, I encourage you to go vote. If you have voted, I encourage you to invite others to go vote. Now is the time for us to put our support behind this powerful queen. Thank you for generously giving of your time today to look at this video. Make sure you know what your values are, because your values will allow you to live an empowered life, a purposeful life. Blessing.